New Zealand First supports the bill.
The Honourable Shane Jones.
Wahine mā. Kia ora tātou, mōrena. Sir, stand to support my colleague here. Him and I were both at various points in our parliamentary history, members of the Finance and Expenditure Committee, members of the Commerce Committee. I just want to focus a little, sir, on why this bill is necessary, and in particular remind ourselves that it gives more confidence to the international providers of capital to New Zealand. Now, sir, the international capital providers want to ensure that when an adverse event takes place, that their percentage of exposure, they have some recourse. They're not completely unsecured, but having said that, that their level of priority is not such that they monster everyone else or that they're left out to dry. So this is important because it speaks to the notion of certainty, and it speaks, sir, to the notion that when a financial entity seeks to raise capital, that it is then capable of taking a punt on how the regulatory framework will remain to the extent, sir, that their interests are, if not protected, then certainly enjoy a high level of priority. And there, sir, we're going into treacherous territory, and I hope that this bill does compensate for the gross level of uncertainty that has recently crept in respect of the speculated or averred the statements that are being made, sir, that the Commerce Act is likely to be changed. And once you start to change, sir, the regulatory framework on the whim or at the instigation of corporate welfare lobbyists, such as those associated with the Chorus Company, it impacts right throughout the system, sir, right throughout the system. Indeed, it can have a systemic effect. And that's why, sir, although we're going to support this bill, it's absolutely essential that people bear in mind that when international financiers look at our economy, they look at the government, and then they look at the sense whether or not a contract can be not only enforced but collected upon. And then, sir, they look at the institutions that a modern economy puts in place to ensure that all parties or stakeholders in a commercial equation have some level of protection. Now let's just think about it. International providers, so there's obvious disciplines around the financial entities, the banks. The fact that they don't pay enough tax is something that will be addressed at the end of next year when they sit over here and we sit over there. But that, sir, at the moment is another matter. The difficulty, sir, is that how do we continue to promote a positive story whilst there is some upside with us agreeing to this bill? How do we continue to promote a positive story that regulatory frameworks will not, in some sort of capricious manner, be changed? Now, so what we must not do is we must not allow the chair of a publicly listed company, now a shining example of the government's small business policy, given that Chorus has lost 40% of its shareholder wealth, so it probably qualifies now for a small business grant, which is presumably, sir, what the government has in mind in terms of the corporate welfare. But the deeper problem, in order to rescue that particular entity, we would then take the profound step of worsening certainty in terms of the commercial framework, the Commerce Act, the Commerce Commission. Now, sir, you may be thinking, well, Mr. Jones, that pertains to what was formerly known as a large company. I think it's insolvent anyway, according to the Prime Minister, but the chair is a friend of mine. But so now that is starting to spread, because when both directors and when international lenders and when international investors see that capriciously, sir, you can change the legal framework in terms of the commercial regulatory framework, cost of capital goes up. Now, this is not going to overcome that problem, sir. The cost of capital will go up. We've seen in here that the banks, and knowing one or three clever roosters myself in the banks, yes, they can go and use these devices to raise capital at a lower level in the European bond markets. Let's hope they get their dollar assumptions right, having had a bit of experience of that in the fishing industry, and when the dollar does move against you, it's not for the faint-hearted. But the point that I'm making here, sir, these are sensible changes, but unfortunately there is a larger threat, and that threat pertains to the framework related to how commercial transactions, how investors are dealt with. We will support the bill, sir.
Members, we come to the vote on this bill. First, we have the Minister's amendments. The question is that the Minister's amendment set out on SOP number 186 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is at parts 1 and 2, the schedule and clauses 1 to 3 as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. I will report this bill with amendment.
The House is resumed. Mr Chairman.
Mr Speaker, the committee has considered the Reserve Bank of New Zealand Covered Bonds Amendment Bill and reports it with amendment. Mr Speaker, I move that the report be adopted.
The question is that the report be adopted. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The bill is set down for third reading forthwith. Honourable Chris